Wonderful. So welcome everyone to the 7th session of the 10-part online training from the UN Trust Fund for new grantees. As you know, the training package is designed to help you, organizations funded by the Trust Fund, to understand and apply our project management requirements and therefore how to meet the terms and conditions of the project cooperation agreement. And this session, Module 7, will refer to and repeat several sections of Module 3 on data collection, but we will now put more emphasis on evaluation requirements. So the reading material is referring back to Section 3 of the Grantee Handbook on Data Collection, and I will also be sending you Section 7 of the handbook, which is on evaluation. We have a whole guidance note on evaluation. But as always, you're strongly encouraged to provide your own organizational or individual tips on monitoring and evaluation at the end of the session. I do continue to encourage you to share any of your experiences, as many of you are, of course, the experts in the field. So I will now share the presentation. And I would ask that when you join the session, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be great. So thank you to those who are joining. I'm just going to put you all on mute. Wonderful. So going back to the presentation, which you should have all received by email as well. So this session on monitoring and evaluation will cover these main things. We'll be looking at helping you understand the UN Trust Fund's monitoring and evaluation requirements, including specifically our expectations for the final external evaluation, for baseline and endline data collection, and some tips on routine monitoring in order to fulfill the requirements of the project cooperation agreement, which sets out that you will need to send us a report every 6 months. However, we will not be able to cover any specific tips on your day-to-day management of your project. We rely on you as experts in the field, and also many of you have been working in your organizations for a long time to know how to manage your work day-to-day. However, I do encourage you to share any tips, including any particular databases, software, tools that you use for data collection or monitoring. We should use each other's experience and skills. So as before, please do share anything either verbally at the end or by email. So as a reminder, and I set this out in, I think, in the very first sessions, our requirements as a trust fund are that you complete these main 4 stages during the 3 years of the project. And that is, at the beginning of the project, you would have a baseline, a starting point for your project, and we've given you up to 6 months to collect that baseline. That during the project, you would be routinely collecting data against the indicators and therefore the baselines in your results framework. And then you would collect what we call the endline, the final data, at the end of the project against those same indicators at the very end of your project, and you will have 1 month at the end of the project to collect and submit that final data. In addition, for large grants, those receiving a large grant over $150,000, you're also required to hire an external evaluator and manage an external evaluation for the project, which should be submitted 2 months after the project end, and you have a budget allocation that most of you have hopefully included for that. So I'm going to go through each of these steps, but with a big focus on the evaluation, as we have not covered that in previous sessions. So as a reminder, what do we mean by baseline, endline, and evaluation? Well, the baseline is very simply the beginning of your project, the condition, the starting point. but against each of your indicators. So that's why at the moment we're very focused with portfolio managers and you on getting your results frameworks agreed, including indicators. And against those measures, you will have the starting point, the baseline data, whether that's quantitative or qualitative. Many of you will have already collected baseline data potentially even before the project has started to inform your project proposal, but we know that the situation can change quite rapidly, so you have time now to update that starting point. The end line is the same, but it's at the end of the project, so it's the condition at the end of your project against those same indicators, against which you can compare what has happened because of your project. And this is needed for each of your indicators, for your outcomes, your outputs, and your goal. And as you can see at the bottom of this slide, the baseline and end line is really all about the routine project monitoring. It's expected that you as project staff can deal with that yourselves. You can of course hire help if you want. You can hire consultants, but baseline and end line data collection should be feasible to be collected internally and used internally by project staff to monitor your projects, or you can certainly hire external experts to help you, and in many cases we do even recommend that if you don't have that much experience on data collection. The external evaluation is an objective assessment, so it has to be an external evaluation. You must hire someone who is independent and external from your organization to conduct that final evaluation, and it looks at progress across the whole of the project. It will use the baseline and endline data, and it will supplement that data with further information that it collects. What I want to stress in this presentation that you could potentially be hiring the same person or same company to help you collect baseline data, routine data during a project, endline and external. Sometimes it's cost effective to be hiring firms, consultants to help you with all of this. But I do need to stress that for the external evaluation, it has to be someone external. So I'll go into that more depth. So those are the basic requirements. When it comes to, I'm going to now go to the external evaluation, which you might think is strange because it's the end of the project. So why would we care about the end of the project now? But planning for a very good evaluation is best to begin that at the very beginning of the project if you want it to be useful. So although we don't require you to submit the evaluation till the end, it's very useful to be thinking about it now. Evaluations can be very useful for you as an organization if well designed, because it will be used as an evidence to raise more money, to inform the next stage of the project. It can help you throughout the project, if well designed, assess the effectiveness of your project. And designing the evaluation now can help you design the baseline, endline, and routine monitoring of the evaluation. So evaluation can be continuously done throughout the project. So it's really important to consider the evaluation now if you have the staff resources and time to do so. So on this slide, you'll see the UN definition of evaluation. An evaluation is an assessment conducted as systematically and impartially as possible of an activity, project, or program. And it will assess the achievement of both expected and unexpected results within your project. And we want to stress that this should be very much owned by your organization. The evaluation should be useful to you. So moving on to slide 5, why is evaluation important? Because evaluation provides that external perspective on your project. It can promote accountability to your donors and to your beneficiaries, and it also provides essential learning, especially for us in the field of ending violence, where there are significant knowledge gaps. And the evaluation should be able to inform your organization in terms of the future of the project, whether it becomes upscaled or replicated, and can provide very powerful evidence for your organization to raise more money. We want to highlight that the evaluation, although a mandatory requirement of the trust fund, please don't see this as a donor-led thing that you have to do for us. We encourage evaluation because it's been proven as best practice and very useful for project planning and for the future of making projects effective. And we do know, because there are knowledge gaps in the field of ending violence, how valuable evaluations can be. So thinking about your evaluation now and planning for it can help build ownership within your organization. Furthermore, we want to highlight that our evaluation guidelines require the evaluation to be gender responsive. And that might seem very obvious because we're all working in the field of ending violence. We work on gender issues every day. But when you hire an external evaluator, and even those consultants that you hire to help you with other data collection and project activities, make sure they're gender sensitive. Make sure they have experience in projects to do with gender equality or ending violence against women. Because a good evaluation in this field will really get deep down and assess the degree to which gender and power relationships have changed because of your intervention. So it won't just look at whether your activities have been done on time and to budget, effectively and efficiently, but hiring a good evaluator and planning for the evaluation now and getting the right person, they can really help assess whether your project has helped change those very deep down structural factors and power dynamics which lead to violence in the first place. So when thinking about your data collection as a whole, but in particular evaluation, do ensure that it is gender responsive, which means that the process of data collection right through to evaluation is inclusive, that you collect the viewpoints of everyone that you can, including those that are usually discriminated against, that it's participatory of both men and women, young and old, and that it's respectful of all those involved. So as I said, this might appear obvious, but it's useful to pass this information on to any contractors that you hire, consultants that you hire, to make sure they understand this too. So external evaluations should be gender responsive. So what are the mandatory requirements as set out in your project cooperation agreement? Well, it states for those of you who have received a large grant over 150,000 that you must deliver a final external evaluation, and it must be delivered at least 2 months after the project ends, which means you have 2 months after the project ends to do the final report, what the consultant does, but you don't have to wait till the end of the project. 10% of the final installment of your grant award will be withheld until we receive that final evaluation, which does have to meet our expectations in terms of quality standards. We have the full guidance note on what these standards are, which you could share with any consultants that you hire, contractors you hire. And to help you meet these standards, myself as the monitoring and evaluation manager and my team, we help you by quality assuring each step of the process. So 4 documents are useful, 4 stages are useful in the evaluation process. You will, at the beginning of the process, devise a terms of reference for your evaluation. So you will share that with me and with your portfolio manager, and we will help check that for you and provide you for some advice. When you hire the evaluator, they will be expected to deliver an inception report, which would be a plan for the evaluation. And we can check that again. We will check that for you. And then the draft report and the final report, we will also be on hand to help you and to help you basically manage the evaluator. So when it comes to the end of the project, the deadlines are here in terms of submission of the reports. You're not required to plan the evaluation until 3 months before the end of the project. But I'm raising this now because there's no harm in you considering right now what would the evaluation plan be. And as I said, if you're hiring people to help with the baseline, the terms of reference for an evaluation and a baseline can be very similar. And you could be looking at being cost effective in terms of hiring a company or an institution or working with a local university to help you with data collection as a whole. And I'll go into that in more detail. But the mandatory requirements is that you don't have to submit the evaluation terms of reference until right at the end of the project, 3 months before. If you're receiving a small grant under 150,000, it's slightly different because of the administrative burden of evaluations. We don't insist that every project has an evaluation. Evaluations are quite expensive, so we found that it was too pricey to think of a very small project having an extensive evaluation. But what we will be doing is working with you to select those projects that really have high value, high benefit in having an evaluation. And we will contact you, the small organizations receiving a small grant, to discuss this with you at least by year 2. And we will select a few of you to evaluate on the basis of the potential for replication or upscaling of your project, for example. And if your project is selected for an evaluation, then the trust fund will be more on hand to help you. We will manage the contracting process for you in recognition that small organizations have less staff to manage. So for you, those of you receiving a large grant, you have to manage the evaluation. For those receiving a small grant, it will be on the basis of potential for evaluation. The evaluation has to cover these main objectives. The evaluation must evaluate the entire project over the 3 years, and it should evaluate your project against certain criteria on how effective your project has been, how relevant to the needs of beneficiaries, how efficient and sustainable. The evaluation should also identify key lessons and promising practices. And the only real way an evaluation can do this and be successful is if you have your project planning very clear. So that's why we're talking about evaluation now, because evaluation can only be effective if you have a very clear project plan and you have data collection and monitoring in place. The evaluation will cover the whole project, as I said. So it will look at basically how well your budget, your inputs, has led to the activities that you planned, have led to the outputs and the outcomes. And ultimately, it will look at and assess whether your project has had any impact on changing the lives of women and girls for the positive or negative in terms of ending violence against women. But specifically, it will look at whether or not your project has effectively met the results that you set out to achieve. So right now, you're working on that results framework and making improvements if needed. And that's vital at this stage so that the evaluator can come in and assess your project on a fair basis against a very logical plan. We have had problems in the past that have led to very poor quality and pretty useless evaluations if the project document wasn't clear, if the project staff and project documents were not clear on the terminology in terms of what is a project goal, if there wasn't any data. So it's vital now to be making sure the project plan is sound. If the project plan is clear and you've been collecting data, then the evaluator will find it much easier to answer the evaluation questions. And for the mandatory evaluation, we have six main questions which the evaluation will be asked to answer. And you, as the owner of the evaluation, will obviously be able to add to these questions, adjust these questions. But the evaluation at the end of the project will, for example, have to answer to what extent were the intended project goal outcomes and outputs achieved and how. And this can only be determined if you have a good project plan in place with data collected that has been routinely monitored against the indicators. The evaluation will also look at things like relevance, efficiency, sustainability, impact, and generation of any knowledge. And our primary goal with evaluations is to generate knowledge and evidence of good practices in the field so that we can all raise more money in the field of ending violence. So having a look at these questions now can be quite useful when you're thinking about your data collection and monitoring. Will the data you're collecting and planning to collect help answer these questions? Moving on to the roles and responsibilities of evaluation, who is going to do what? When it comes to actually managing the task of evaluation, that will be for large grants, that will be you, the organization, and you will need to delegate the evaluation task management role to someone in your organization. That could be the M&E staff member, it could be someone responsible for some aspect of the project. But ideally, it wouldn't be the project manager because it's a good practice to have someone slightly more independent to the project leading the evaluation. Obviously, this depends on the number of staff in your organization. So it is entirely flexible. We know in smaller organizations, you as the project officer may have to deal with everything. But we're just saying it's good practice, if it's possible, that it wouldn't be the project manager who actually leads on the evaluation. And of course, the executive director or the head of your organization really should take a very strong role in leading and overseeing the process, because how important evaluation can be, and it has to be owned by the organization. You don't need to decide now who's going to manage the evaluation. If you decide to leave this task until the end of the project, then that's fine. But if you are considering now hiring a consultant to manage data collection, including the evaluation, then you may want to consider now who is going to oversee that task. In the Trust Fund, we're here to help you in terms of reviewing terms of reference for the consultants if you want some advice. We're also here if you particularly need advice on even baseline data collection on an ad hoc basis. Your portfolio manager is really a stakeholder. So when it comes to the final evaluation, they would be interviewed as a stakeholder, not involved in quality assuring the report. That's what I would be doing in supporting you as an M&E person. It is recommended that when you get close to the evaluation that you have a broad evaluation group that would include other stakeholders. And you may already be thinking about having a stakeholder or beneficiary group to oversee the project as a whole, so you can even raise this already in terms of thinking who are the primary stakeholders in your project that will be involved from day one, and then eventually will be helping with the evaluation. When it comes to the evaluator themselves, you will be hiring an external evaluator, and we must emphasize the importance of whoever you hire to do the evaluator being independent from the organization. This means they must not have been involved in designing project activities, executing project activities, managing or advising on any aspect of the project. They can, however, be involved in baseline data collection, data collection during the project, design of indicators, design of monitoring tools, and data collection. That's fine. But they cannot be involved, for example, in a project activity that was designing a community awareness raising session or designing an advocacy strategy for some project activity, because it would be unfair and not independent for an evaluator to be assessing work that they've completed. But you can, and very sensibly, hire consultants to help you with data collection from baseline through to evaluation. Going back to our procurement rules, we would of course expect you to go through an open, transparent recruitment process to compare CVs, to look at cost effectiveness, and to select an evaluator in accordance to your procurement rules. We have in UN Women excuse me, a database of gender responsive evaluators. I've put that link. In that database, you can find experts, to be honest, experts on gender and ending violence overall, not just evaluation. You can search for consultants by region, by language skills, by expertise. So if you're struggling to find experts, then that's quite a good source. We also encourage you, ideally, of course, to be hiring national staff, so people based in your country, because the UN is committed to supporting national capacity. However, if you do struggle to find experts nationally, then you can, of course, speak to your portfolio manager and exceptions can be made. When it comes to the final evaluation, we quite often see international experts hired as the primary evaluator, and then they will hire junior experts in country. So you can have a combination of international and national consultants if that's the best way. When hiring consultants to do any data collection or evaluation on your project, it's important to check their experience. We do highly recommend, of course, that you hire people who have experience in gender programming and specifically ending violence. We have seen problems with experts who have claimed to be experts in the field of ending violence, but when you look at their CV, they don't, and there are very specific skills and knowledge to working in the field of ending violence, which, going back to the ethics and safety session, are quite clear that there are some particular protocols which experts on violence against women understand more than other experts. Again, of course, if you find it a struggle to find these experts in your area, then just come and speak to us. Let us know if you have any issues. So moving on to the process of evaluation, and again repeating, well, why am I telling you this now when the evaluation comes at the end? Well, there are 5 main stages to the evaluation process. The planning stage, the preparation, conducting the evaluation, doing the final evaluation report, and then disseminating. And we have a full guidance document on all these steps. And right now, though, you're at the planning stage, because actually preparing for the evaluation doesn't have to happen until the end of the project, because you can only evaluate the project at the end. But planning can start now, because you've already got a budget. Most of you have budgeted 20,000 as per our rules for the evaluation budget, and that's ring-fenced, and we highly recommend you even budget more if you can, but let's see. That's my view, because I'm a monitoring and evaluation person. Evaluation can be expensive, and planning for evaluation now can help you ensure that you have the right budget, and can also help you look at that budget not just about the final year. We do encourage you to put that budget in the final year, but there are options to split that budget by year, and also look at combining that budget with your baseline data collection and monitoring. So we are open to suggestions from you if you want to manage your evaluation budget differently to make optimal use of all your M&E resources, as long as you do make sure that you budget 20,000 overall for the evaluation. You may want to, as I said, hire a company to help you right through to baseline to evaluation, so you can combine the budget and see what's the most cost efficient and effective way to split the budget through the year. And right now, of course, you're planning your project and designing it in the best way for it to be evaluated. You'll be building, monitoring, evaluation systems. So this is your chance now to reflect on your budget for the evaluation. And as you're designing your baseline data collection, consider whether the balance of your resources are sound across the stages of your data collection process. So planning for final evaluation can ideally begin now. Look at your budget. Is it optimal? Does it need to be split further by a year? Is your project design sound? Can it be evaluated? And are you planning well for routine data collection, which I will come on to next. And as I said, you can hire people to help you with baseline, endline, and evaluation. You could even consider partnering with local universities, institutions, academics. If you are doing that, please do tell us at the end of the session. We really want to learn from people. We've had in the past organizations that have partnered with local universities who've been able to use free help from research students working in the field of gender, who can then offer their free time, even as interns for your organization. And if you really want to get deep into how to design different evaluations, I've put a link at the bottom here to a very good resource which is available in many languages, www.betterevaluation.org, which has a lot of resources on how to design evaluation. So essential requirements to make sure your evaluation can be done and is useful is right now making sure you have a clear project theory of change, making sure that your project strategies, approaches, and methodologies are clear. This doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be documented now, but during your project, if you have a specific strategy that needs to be documented, that's very helpful. Your results framework should be SMART, including specific, measurable, achievable, results-orientated indicators, baselines, and targets. And then during your project, you will need to have regular monitoring data and very clear project reports which the evaluator can make use of. And throughout all of that, we emphasize the importance of making this participatory and getting as much feedback from beneficiaries and stakeholders throughout the process as possible. So when I emphasize the importance of monitoring, I am going to just go back to session 3, which was on data collection monitoring. Just repeat some of the main messages. And as I've said throughout, the importance of your results framework and making sure you know what your project goal, outcome, and outputs are, and they're very clear, is vital. Because during the project, you will be expected to monitor progress against the results framework. And at the end, the evaluator will assess your progress against all parts of the results framework. As I mentioned earlier, you are expected to have baseline data, which you're collecting now in the first 6 months. You're expected to have the endline data at the end of the project, and you are expected in your results framework to have specific targets. Now, targets may not be possible to devise that easily. Many of you have specific targets for number of beneficiaries reached. Always remember that the process of monitoring may also include adjusting your targets. So if after you've collected your baseline data, you feel that you need to adjust your targets, that is, of course, feasible. The baseline data needs to be collected within 6 months and entered into the baseline section of your results framework, at which point you would also update your targets if necessary. So I'm going to show you an example. So on this page, slide 22 is an example of a results framework, a snapshot of a results framework. And in it, I've just put 2 indicators. And I went through this in session 3, so I won't go into it in too much depth. But just as a reminder that you're really at step 1 and step 2 and step 3 right now of devising your project results, setting your indicators, setting your data collection methods, and then within 6 months, we expect you to have that data at the beginning of your project. You can revise your target to make it very relevant and not too ambitious. And then every 6 months, you will be asked to report online, and we have another session on reporting. So every 6 months, you will be expected to monitor progress against the indicators that you can. And then at the end, you will collect that final data. So this is an example for a qualitative and a quantitative indicator. For qualitative indicators, I just wanted to set a reminder that obviously for qualitative indicators, your data will be narrative, will be text. You might need to provide an explanation. For example, you may, in this case, the data collection method was interviews with survivors, where they collected information through interviews. And so the data that's been put in the data collection baseline is a summary of their assessment of the survivors' views. For example, it says survivors reported being generally unsatisfied with services. And I've said see notes. You can always add additional documentation to your reports. When you come to do this online, you will have the option to upload additional Word documents, additional summaries. But there is no expectation, as a reminder, there's no expectation from us that you would suddenly provide us with a big baseline report. You do not need to provide a baseline, massive, long research or baseline report. For the trust fund, we're just looking for data in this column, the baseline data column. We're looking for a summary of your position at the beginning of the project. If you want to provide further analysis and explanation, you are very welcome to do that, and we would expect you, for your own monitoring purposes, to have that internally. But there's no expectation from us that you would be doing a big baseline study. You just need baseline data to monitor your project. So that's our expectations for monitoring. And every 6 months you will be asked to complete a project report. And whether or not you can collect data for the indicators in your results framework will really depend on the frequency and availability of data. And as I mentioned before, I expect that your organizations will have your own monitoring tools and will keep track of when data is available, when you can refresh it, and when not. Our expectations, which is just from experience, just basic experience, is that every 6 months you should really ideally be able to report and add data at output level, because outputs tend to be things that can be achieved every year or every 6 months. Outcome level, which is a much longer term change, often in changes in behaviors and attitudes, you may not be able to collect data until the first year or second year. And obviously for the goal, which is the much longer term change, you may only have 2 data points, perhaps the baseline and end line. So this session doesn't really go in depth on that, but if you want more advice on frequency of data collection, availability of data, then let me know. But we expect that you as an organization would have that on hand and have your own systems in place. So that comes to slide 24, and I'm nearly at the end of the presentation. Who's collecting all this data? Well, the collection of the baseline and the end line, as I mentioned at the start, can be done by project staff or external consultants. So you could be hiring someone to do both. When it comes, though, to the final evaluation, it has to be someone external. So you could be hiring a company or consultant to help you with baseline, endline, and final evaluation. But just a reminder that any consultants hired to do the evaluation have to be completely independent. And ideally, anyone involved in M&E can keep objective in independence. Some final tips when thinking about monitoring and evaluation. And as you're now at that time of devising your indicators, don't feel that you have to have hundreds of indicators. Really just a few good indicators and a few good data collection methods are much more manageable. So when approaching your data collection, think about perhaps, well, the key beneficiary groups. How will I collect data from the women and girls who are my beneficiaries? How will I collect data from the secondary beneficiaries, whether that's government officials? And you could think of it in that way, of one data collection method per beneficiary group. And data collection methods, if they're well designed, can collect data for several indicators. So do think about using the same data collection methods to measure several indicators. So if you're devising a focus group, obviously that focus group can include several questions for discussion, which could help you collect data for indicators at the goal level, outcome level, and output level. Keep it simple. Consider, how will I collect data during project activities? As I said, there's no need, unless you have the money and the time, to do, for example, a massive knowledge and attitudes and perceptions survey. You don't necessarily need to do mass surveys at the beginning of your project. What you can do is be asking pertinent questions and collecting data during project activities. So is there a simple way you can be collecting information from beneficiaries before a community awareness raising session, whether that's through a form or through a non-verbal way of raising hands? Are there easy ways you can be collecting testimonies from beneficiaries during activities, rather than using very large and costly methods such as wide-scale surveys? As I mentioned before, do think about getting help, not only from consultants that you have to pay for, but other local institutions, organizations, universities that you could partner with. And don't reinvent the wheel. As I've shown you before, we have a lot of examples of data collection methods, and we also have an evaluation library, which I will send you with examples of the evaluations. And what I encourage you all to do is share tools that you're using. So one example that I've put here is that there is a free online data collection monitoring system called the COBO Toolbox, which is free specifically for humanitarian organizations. It was designed for, and it's free, where it can help you build survey forms to collect data. It can help you design questions. It can be used by many different staff members, and then it will upload that information to the cloud that you can analyze later. So there are lots of free systems out there, and what I would like to ask is that you share what you're using so that others can learn from that. So those are my last tips. And just to recap, this session has covered very specifically the requirements for the final external evaluation and how your data collection monitoring will contribute to that final evaluation. And I would now like to open for any questions. So I shall go back to the chat box and ask if you have any questions. And you can ask any questions in the chat box. And we will be doing, obviously, a session on reporting that will show you the reporting system. So you may have questions about that, but that will be the next session. So I hope you found that useful. And as I said, any tips that you have in terms of systems that you use, databases you use, whether you've partnered with local institutions, tips are very welcome. Okay, so we have a question. That's fine. Jonathan asks, unrelated to today's session, I'm wondering if there are templates available for the finance and narrative reports. Yes, we do. We have a template. We're updating our reporting guidance to make it some more user-friendly, but we can definitely share you the offline versions of the templates. Yes, I will share them for next week's session. We have a question. Do we have to carry out the baseline survey before we carry out other activities? No, it depends on the type of activity, and so it will depend on your project. So for some of you, the first activity could be to identify project participants. So there is no baseline for that. So some activities, the baseline will be 0. That will be the assumed. So many activities don't require a baseline survey, or you can very much assume that the baseline is 0. So what you really do need to do is devise your indicators. That's the first step, because it's only when you devise the indicators will you know whether the baseline is likely to be 0 or whether you really need to collect a baseline before you do the activity. So it's not an easy yes or no. It depends on your results chain, your plan, and what your activities are. And no, some activities do not need to wait for a baseline. Nora asks, should we share the transcripts for interviews you do during data collection? No, not at all. We don't require any of that. What we would love to see is obviously the summary. So if you're doing interviews, that will lead to an assessment against an indicator, such as perspectives of women, perspectives of survivors. We would expect to see the summary, your analysis, just a snapshot. You won't have much space in the report, but you can always, as I said, attach a summary analysis. No, it's not mandatory. No, we will ask you if we want further information, but there is no mandatory requirement to share any transcripts. Thank you, Nora. Yes, it's quite hard to give you specific advice on baselines unless I see the actual indicator. So you can always give me or the actual result you're trying to measure, because then we can give concrete advice, because for every error indicator it can be a slightly different answer. Do we have templates for terms of reference for the evaluators? Sanjay? Yes, we do. So we have an exact template, which I will send you after this session. The template might be very useful for other consultants. So you can adapt the terms of reference for the evaluation for a baseline survey, or you could adapt the terms of reference for a midline. So yes, we have a template, terms of reference. Martin asks, is there a general data management and protection system that you and Trust Fund could share? Or we can have ours. You can have yours. This is where I'm looking for us, you as a network, to share ideas. I don't have a recommendation on a specific data management and protection system. We obviously have our specific rules on ethics and safety that any data would be protected. So by that we would mean if it was on your computer that it would be password protected and that you would have protocols for changing those passwords. And most organizations do have certain IT security standards that if you're storing data in files and locked cabinets that they're locked, that they don't have names on them. But we don't have a specific note. But I would ask if any of you do have a recommendation, then please share it. Hi, Jonathan. Yes, you want to see the finance and narrative reporting templates today? Yes, I'll ask your portfolio manager to send those to you today. Sure. Could you remind me which organization you're from, Jonathan? Okay, thank you. Beyond Borders, yeah. Yes, if anybody needs something specific, I always encourage you to write to your portfolio managers for anything very specific that you need, because then they can also keep track of the kind of questions that you're asking. Also, we have some of the portfolio managers online, so they're very welcome to add anything. I think we do, or we don't. And we also have my colleague Danielle is online, and Shruti. They're also in the monitoring and evaluation team. Feel free to say hi, Shruti, or Danielle. Danielle assists on evaluation, and Shruti will be supporting me on looking at your data collection tools, ethics and safety protocols. Okay, we've got lots of people keen on reporting. It's just like for me, it's the most boring part, but if you're interested. Okay, also copy, it's the most important part, I know. Finance and narrative, yes. Yes, so that's also the Refugee Consortium. So yes, bear with us. I'm going to send you what we have. We're trying to make it more user-friendly. What I'll send you is what we have right now. And if you really, any thoughts on how we can make it more user-friendly is always welcome. We always welcome feedback. We're trying always to make our reporting templates and the guidance easier to reduce the burden. So that's Refugee Consortium and Beyond Borders. So we'll see if there's any questions. So I do encourage you through something else, sorry. Another question came in from Associate Anacal. It's important to mention things like success stories and challenges when they're mentioned in the system. Yes, success stories, challenges. When it comes to the reporting, you will be asked, yes, to share what was your biggest success for the last reporting period. What was your biggest challenge? We will always be asking you questions like that. And also, we will always love to see case studies and stories of women and girls. So if you are able to document a story from a beneficiary, if you have permission, then great. Chimsok, when we recruit the external consultant, shall we engage the trust fund to interview? No, we don't help with interviews. We don't help if you're a large organization receiving more than 150. If you could confirm that, that would be great. We don't help with the recruitment process. What we do is provide you with the standard terms of reference you can use, which includes, as I mentioned in the presentation, the recommended qualifications and experiences. And we trust you to then go ahead and recruit someone who meets the requirements. So we will check the terms of reference and we will make recommendations to you. But it really depends on your context. As I mentioned, in some countries it might be harder to find certain expertise. So when it comes to the process of recruiting the consultant, we will advise on the terms of reference, but we won't get involved in interviews or selection. In terms of seeing the CV, you will be expected to attach the CV of the selected consultant. This is also partly because we can add the consultant to our database if they wish, so that we can have a good network of experts. But we don't take any part in reviewing the CVs. Unless you're really struggling, I mean, if you really need our advice, of course, we're here for you. But mainly we leave it to you to do the recruitment process. If you're a small organization receiving 150,000, we do take that burden completely off you, and we will be doing the recruitment process, doing the interviews, and selecting the consultant with you. But yes, if in doubt, just email us. If we have time to help, we will always try to. The only reason we don't help is just because of time limitations. It's not possible for us to get involved in recruitment processes for all of your projects. Sorry, that was sent privately. So that was a question on, do we need to see the CV of the external consultant? Yes, when it's attached to the draft report, but we don't get involved in selection. Angelina asked, if we have challenges working with an external evaluator, if the report's not up to standard, how is this managed? That's an excellent question, because we have had problems. We give you advice. So you are the evaluation manager. We will always give you advice, and you would lead on negotiation with the evaluation manager. We have a lot of tips in our guidance. The tips that we include are quite simple, but sometimes people forget. For example, never pay your evaluator, your consultant up front. Only pay them in installments on the basis of performance. So, if they aren't up to standard, you can decide to close the contract and hire someone else. Explaining the guidance, making sure they've read the guidance, making sure they understand the project. We definitely can help in terms of, we will offer to do a webinar like this one. They can watch the training session. You can recommend the consultant speaks to me to get our viewpoint to get our explanation direct from the United Nations. So there are things we can definitely do to help you. But the best way of challenges is to find out soon and deal with it soon. So, for example, in the evaluation process, or even if you're hiring a consultant to do a study for you, a baseline or a project activity, always ask the consultant to submit a proposal to you or an inception report that will describe their approach to the activity, and only pay them for that first stage. And then on the basis of that proposal or that inception, would you go on to contract them to do the whole activity for you, because at that first stage you can assess whether they're going to be challenging or difficult to work with, or whether their expertise is not sufficient. So yeah, best tip, never pay up front, always pay in installments. Make sure you know what their standard of work is. Another way is also always to ask them for samples of their writing. So if they say on their CV that they've produced evaluations, ask them to send you the sample. Also, of course, ask for references. Angelina asks, can the report include audio-visual products? Um, yeah, for the report, for any of the reports you do for us in terms of the reports every 6 months or the evaluation, you can certainly include links to audio-visual. It's good evidence, especially if it's interview, if you have consent with beneficiaries. So that way you can include that as a link either in the report or attached. As I said, there will be in the reporting template a place for you to upload links. However, when it comes to the final evaluation, it's always the narrative. You always still have to do some analysis. You wouldn't be able to just link to the video without any commentary. You'd still have to give some analysis or provide an outline of why the video is important. But for communications purposes, audio visuals are great. Eunice says, do we have to share the data collection methods for the ENDLINE now? I'm going to have to say it all depends again. What we're asking for you to do is send us data collection methods for indicators that are sensitive, for which you will be collecting the baseline, predominantly the baseline. So if you're planning to do interviews with women survivors of violence, focus groups with women at risk, any activities with children, we ask that you send us the methods if you're planning to collect the baseline for those. If you're not planning to devise those, to do those methods until, say, the very end of the project, then no, we can't. I'm not expecting you to send me methods that you haven't written yet. However, the first point of call, of course, is the indicators for your results framework and being very clear what your data collection methods are. So you will be working with that with your portfolio managers, and if in doubt, we will let you know, okay, we want to see the method for this indicator. So if in doubt, ask your portfolio manager. But the first thing is to devise your indicators and decide what methods will be used, and will you be collecting data at baseline and ENDLINE, or just ENDLINE, and then we can move from there to see which methods need ethical and safety protocols and which methods the trust fund would like to see. So sorry, lots of depends. It all depends on your results framework. So yes, the best suggestion is once you've finished your results framework in terms of your results chain and indicators, you can write to your portfolio manager and say that's finished now, and you can say, well, which methods should I send? If you're in doubt, just ask us the question. If you're willing to share tools, irrespective of whether you need to, we do have that space where we like to share tools. So we're always keen to see them. Because we can share them with other organizations and learn from each other. Great, thank you for all the good questions. I know a lot of them are referring also to the reporting, and you're very keen to see the reporting templates. So we will do that, and then that's hopefully a lot clearer. Great, it seems like the questions are slowing down. So unless anyone else has any further questions, we'll close the session. And of course, you're very welcome to leave whenever you feel like leaving. And any outstanding questions can be sent to your portfolio managers. Wonderful. Thank you. Many of you will have received, hopefully, the test scores for all the modules so far. We decided to send that in bulk from Danielle, so thanks to Danielle. And a few of you may have to retake the test if you didn't get 90%. Hopefully that's not too onerous for you. We try and keep the tests as simple as possible. It's just to show to us whether there's anything additional that we need to repeat. And we always encourage feedback to me or portfolio managers, anything else you want to learn. The training is very focused on requirements for the trust fund, but if there's anything additional you have questions on at any time, please let us know. So that's it. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. I hope you're all well. Please give our best to your teams, and please let us know if you have any questions. So thank you very much. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon. So take care. Bye. Goodbye, everyone.